Hello. Good evening, everyone. Happy 73rd Republic Day to all. On behalf of Vani, the Literary and Public Speaking Club of IIM Amritsar, I, Ayush Karia, and Shubham Tripathi welcome you all to the fourth edition of our flagship event, SAMVAD. 26 January 1950, when the Constitution of India became effective. It laid down the framework that demarcates fundamental political code, structure, procedures, powers, and duties of government institutions, and sets out fundamental rights, directive principles, and duties of the citizens. But we citizens across the world forgot the duties towards Mother Nature. Climate change poses a severe threat for mankind as it threatens the essential ingredients of good health, that is, clean air, safe drinking water, nutritious food supply, and safe shelter, and has the potential to undermine the decades of progress in global health. However, every challenge is an opportunity. Here, it creates opportunities for innovations in technology and services. Now, without taking much of your time, let us begin Samvad 4.0, where participants from various academic backgrounds will offer their thoughts on the theme Climate Change, Threat to Mankind versus Opportunity for Sustainability. But before going ahead with the discussion, I would request Shubham to introduce our participants briefly.
It brings us great pleasure to announce the event participants. Our first participant is Mr. Sohan Paikre, an undergraduate medical student pursuing MBBS from AIMS Raipur. Apart from being prolific in academics, he is also an orator, writer, painter, sports and fitness enthusiast. He is the co-author of about 5 anthologies and won a couple of national awards from his authored articles and narratives. Our second participant is Mr. Vishal Garg, a civil engineering student from IIT Kanpur. He is an avid reader. He has also participated in various MUNs and debates and won many accolades there. Also, he carries a deep interest in spirituality and has read many books on that aspect. Our third participant is Mr. Shivang Agrawal, an arts, law, and soon to be a management graduate from IIM Shillong. He is a lawyer from New Delhi. He undertook a broad spectrum of internships during his undergraduate studies, from working with the United Nations, an NGO, a think tank, and a law firm and an advocate. Moving on to our next participant, Mr. Nitin Rathi. He is a first-year PhD scholar at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is currently doing research in the field of disaster management. His hobbies and interests are teaching and yoga. Our last participant is Miss RVSS Aparna, a first-year management student from IIM Amritsar. She is a responsible and diligent individual who values discipline and structured thinking in every task she takes up. She has actively participated in several co-curricular and extracurricular activities throughout her life and has received accolades in the same. She takes an interest in playing badminton and also enjoys dancing. We welcome you all.
Now, let us start the discussion by getting your thoughts on the theme. We will begin with Vishal first. So, Vishal, our first question to you is, we all have grown up seeing newspaper reports and movies about illegal sand mining. Sand mining destroys rivers, although there are alternatives to sand, but they aren't widely used. Can you please enlighten us on the most viable alternatives and their availability in the Indian context? Also, how they can become mainstream in the 15 to 25 years? Will it be economically viable as well?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction and such a beautiful question. So now many of the participants may think that why there is so much fuss about this sand, mitti to hai, like it is available everywhere, or we may see some sand dunes or a desert, like it's lying everywhere. But there is a critical difference actually. The critical difference lies between the sand that we use in our construction or the everyday affairs of life. That is not the sand that is found in desert or anything. That is special sand, and those sands we get from riverbed sand, or these kind of sands we are actually using there. So there is critical shortage of them. That's why as you stated that there are illegal sand mining going on, and that also affects the how the economical stability of that area as well as ecological stability. So now coming on to the what are the alternatives that we have? The alternatives, like there are many crush wastage or the used sand that is waste generally, but we can actually recycle that. Similarly, there are copper slag, there are waste foundry waste, there are natural crushed rock sand. These kind of alternatives are present there, but the key problem that comes with them is the viability. And as you asked, that how they can actually be made viable in India, what are the scenarios that in which we can actually make them applicable. So coming on to that point, just going a little bit technical, what do we mean by actually sand and where do we use? We generally use it in concretes or making construction. So they are fine aggregates, and the aggregate size is actually very important in analyzing the sand's behavior. And now coming to the aspect that how India can move towards these alternatives, that is manufactured sand. Um, we have some positive note on that. Pune Mumbai expressway was made entirely on this manufactured sand. This has slowly been cropping up in India, that we are moving towards that direction. But there are, I would list 3-4 major reasons why we are still a long way to go ahead. First of all, since it is a very new concept, till now these kind of sand mining is all going on. So what is happening, that there is a fear among people. Why there is fear among the builders or contractors? That there is no actually standardization of the procedures, that how these manufactured sand are going to actually play a role. Because there has been instances that since this is a technology which requires knowledge, expertise of that field, and that has not been so much prevalent to the river bedside sand that we generally use. So people have been cheated. So there is a prevalent fear that if they use, since whenever there is something construction happens, if there is a failure, then it gives a lot of discredit to the company or the manufacturing firm that is doing, and it gives a lot of discredit to them. That's why they do not want to opt them. Second thing that I would like to point out is government is also actually not in that direction, because it is not that economical. You people are from IIM, you may talk more about the economical aspect than better than me. But talking about technicality, since it talks about that how we have to take the technology, and this technology is not available everywhere. And third thing, this type of manufactured sand is not available in India. We are importing it from countries like Malaysia, China, and all those things. So even though it can be economically somewhat feasible, but due to the transportation cost, it is not becoming that kind of feasible. So that is also a key challenge that lies ahead. So what are the solutions that we have? So coming to the solutions that we have, first of all, we should have the government intervention. The most of the resources that we have, whether it is technological, the human resource, they lies with the government, to be very honest. Even private players have that, but the kind of investment government can do, that private players cannot do as of now. So government has to actually push in. But seeing India as a developing country, so they are going for the alternative, since India is also a coastal kind of country where there are so many rivers which are not available anywhere. So as you said, is it an opportunity or a threat? So as they say that the necessity is the mother of invention. So, but I think we are moving towards that stage that we have to do it, but it would take time for India to really catch up on this manufactured sand business. I hope that somewhat answers your question.
Those are some really crucial points that you mentioned, Vishal. So moving on to Sohan, our question to you is that these days we can see a lot of plant-based meat and similarly highly processed food products such as plant-based meat, etc., which are being promoted in the name of being more eco-friendly and less carbon-emitting food products. What are the health impacts of consuming these products? Should one substitute these products or eat them? Eating them occasionally is the better option.
Thank you, Subham. I extend my warm greetings to everyone present on the virtual platform. And yes, wishing everyone a very happy 73rd Republic Day. Without any further delay, let's begin. Coming to the question, that's a very small counter question from the start. Sofit, Epigamia, Mr. Vase, Soya Chaps, were any of these names on the top? No, wait. Were they even in the list of the food items that you craved for maybe 10 to 15 years back? Well, obviously not. But in the last decade, these have managed to establish themselves as superior alternatives over their natural counterparts. Actually, the names I took are the brands of the plant based products that have taken the nutrition market by a whirlpool, with the trend of being vegan has started to get into the nerves of the millennials. And with time, it has become an integral part of the daily diet of a million of people out there. So basically, eating more plant-based product is touted to be better for health, ethics, climate, and being someone from the medical fraternity, I should enrich you with the best possible insight into the changes in the health dynamics post this dietary revolution first, and then, if time permits, I'll also touch upon the environmental prospects too, because we are on a forum that is voicing its concern for the climate change. Prime and positive things first. Studies have shown that plant-based products have been proficient enough to address the modern health issues of obesity, hypertension, and diabetes mellitus. This is because of their excellent antioxidant property. The American Heart Association has also stated that the plant-based product consumption has improved heart health and reduces the risk of cardiovascular diseases. So yes, of course, the results are quite encouraging and applaudable. But wait, let's not just get carried away by all this. There are some certain drawbacks, and we'll deal with that with a small example. That is the best plant-based or most widely used is the plant-based meat. They have excess of sodium. Many of you think, well, that's great, we are getting a lot of sodium into the body, but unfortunately high sodium intake for prolonged periods can lead to an array of heart diseases, starting from hypertrophy, heart failure, kidney stones, and even cancer of the stomach. So that's a sad news. And these products are deficient in many micronutrients, and if we continuously avoid these in the diet, they can lead to some serious complications, like iron deficiency can give birth to anemia, vitamin B12 will give you a nervous system related disorders, and our bone will start losing density if we cut short on vitamin D. So yes, and lastly, these obviously will contain a long list of fillers, additives, colors, preservatives, because they are trying to mimic something that is natural, and it will automatically come, and we'll be ingesting a wholesome amount of carcinogenic poison into ourselves with each diet. So coming to the question of the substitution, I would like to say that a plant-based diet is not all or nothing program, but a way of life that is tailored to each individual. A healthy plant-based diet requires planning, reading labels, and discipline. What to eat and what to avoid is of great value in this aspect. Take for example, a diet for a kidney disease patient living in the UK or at a risk of it will be obviously designed on different standards when compared to the same disease patient taking part in India or a heart patient in the US. These all diets will be completely different from the diet of an apparently healthy person in some other part of the world. So a registered dietitian should be a part of the healthcare team that designs a plant-based diet so that he knows what your body needs, in what amount, and for how long. Not taking much of your time, I'll just brief you on the environmental dimension of this venture. Yes, it is true that plant-based products are going to lessen your emission, carbon emission, because 15% of the greenhouse emission was coming from your livestock, and it will certainly lessen it. But there are traitors in this field as well. For example, the soybean, which was being used as an alternative, is being used as an alternative actually. So hexane, a chemical, is being used in the processing, which is a potent air pollutant. So environmental dimension also gives us mixed graph plots about the pros and cons. So what is my approach is that a balanced and sustainable approach towards the plant-based diet, keeping in mind the health concern associated, is what is the need of the hour. So that's from my side.
Yes, Sohan, that was really amazing. And yes, we definitely need a dietitian. So now, okay, now moving to Shivang now. So Shivang, our first question to you is, with growing environmental activism, even developing countries are asked to commit big and spend large. At the same time, an adequate capital contribution is not being provided to them by the more affluent nations. How does this affect a developing country like India and the businesses herein if a lot of money goes into financing cleaner energy sources that could be otherwise spent on other needs by using cheaper fossil fuels? How do you see this?
Thank you, Ayush, for your question. I think it's an interesting dichotomy that we're discussing here between either spending on cleaner fuels or being able to keep our economy on full steam. And the fact about that is that I don't see it as a binary choice. At the end of the day, more and more businesses are moving towards ESG, right? The triple bottom line. So what you're looking at is that you want to take profits on one hand, wealth on the other, long-term commitment to your shareholders as the primary need. But also you want to make sure that the coming generations of tomorrow are not left with an empty planet. So as far as your question is framed as, it asks that countries, I wouldn't say poor countries, but let me say developing nations such as India and the Indian subcontinent. Uh, Partially, we can just say apart from the United States, Europe, UK, parts of Russia, everybody else that comes under the developing nation countries, they are being asked to spend and take a bigger and bigger share of the costs of cutting down on fossil fuel emissions. I think the primary problem with this approach is that these countries, the kind of sector they depend on for their GDP and economic growth is the manufacturing sector. Services are coming up, but in terms of the entire, the kind of emissions that we give out, it's not the KPOs and BPOs, it's the textile, it's leather tanneries on the river Ganga that is actually polluting the entire environment. Now, this coupled with the fact that countries like India actually buy garbage from countries, and I'm sorry you did hear that right. Countries like India actually let richer countries sell garbage to us. And in a way, we get something back for that. And I know that comes as a shock to a lot of people here. But I think that is at the heart of the problem, that the lack of perhaps political will, which we've seen for a very, very long time, that people are not willing to accept that our people have the rights as people living in perhaps Netherlands or Luxembourg, right? We think that it's okay to go on with this. I think that's part of the problem. The second problem that I think would be that cleaner energy sources, the technology behind that has been kept a secret from this land. We do not know what to do. Countries like Israel that are really, really good at technology, they have figured out how to use ocean water to power their turbines, right? They figured out how to make salt from it. They figured out how to make fresh water from ocean water. They have all of that figured out. But that technology is not shared with us. So now this puts an unfair burden on countries like India to actually move to that cleaner direction. With countries such as US, being shaky on the Paris Agreement, the IPCC being taken as a joke, the United Nations Framework for Climate Change, UNFCCC, not being taken enough seriously. I think these are some of the problems that perhaps makes Greta Thunberg angry, right? These are some of the things that the average millennial today is angry for. And I think to sum up my thoughts, I would say that countries like India, while they have to think about the triple bottom line, we have to think about economic, social, governance angles. We perhaps cannot bear the burden of developing these technologies ourselves. We perhaps need to wait for electric vehicles to come here unless there is a global stand towards moving towards helping these countries. And I think I'm going to end with that. Thank you.
Those were some really thought-provoking concept that you brought forward, and some issues that must be taken into consideration. Now we'll be heading to Nitin, and our question to you, Nitin, is that renewables provide a less carbon emitting source of energy. Solar panels, wind turbines both need a lot of space. Similarly, as it has been seen, wind farms affect the birds in a particular region, whereas nuclear power is a much better source but still opposed by many environmental groups. Are we in an era of environmental apocalypticism? And how do you see all this?
Thank you, Subham. If I talk about the renewable energy sources emit either zero emission or very less carbon emission in the comparison of non-renewable energy sources. If I talk about the area covered by the wind turbines and the solar panels, yes, it is true that they need more space but they are providing clean and green energy. If I talk about the approx 8 billion population of the world is living on the approx less than 20% of the land area out of the world. So we don't have less land, but we will have to use that land in a very efficient way. If I talk about the wind turbines, the birds killed by the wind turbines, according to an estimate, a wind turbine killed 4 to 5 birds in an year. So if we compare this estimated data with the other data, so we found that in each year, 2.4 million birds are killed by only the cats. That is 1 million less in the comparison of uh, wind turbines. So it is true, but some developed countries like as Norway, they are working on this technologies. They are making these less harmful to the birds. And if I talk about the nuclear energy, so then nuclear energy sources are cleaner sources of energy, but they are very uh, they are not the permanent sources of energy, and they are producing a lots of harmful waste. And the waste management of nuclear uh, reactors is not easy task, and we don't have enough storage so that we can store these harmful substances. If I talk about the apocalyptic world, so the at present, if the rate of these greenhouse gas emissions will continue at the same rate in the by the end of this century, we will certainly turn this planet into a disastrous world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitin. That was really important point. And yes, the settlement of these nuclear waste is definitely a serious challenge for us. Okay, so now moving to Aparna now. So Aparna, our first question to you is, transportation is also one of the significant factors responsible for the climatic changes that have happened till now. What do you think could be a strategy towards incentivizing transition to zero emission across all forms of transportation needs and necessities of human life?
Thanks for the question, Ayush. So, yes, as you rightly pointed out, transportation is probably one of the most important and major contributors to the climate change that is happening. One obvious, the poisonous gases that are released, this is causing the air pollution that we're seeing now. So, coming to the zero emission policy that we're talking about, how we can achieve it? Well, I don't think like there cannot be one single strategy that can be used to achieve this net zero emissions. So, we have to use a kind of a multi pronged approach that will move us towards net zero emissions. And probably the first most obvious solution that we can see is a switch from the current fuels that we're using into cleaner fuels. Like Shivang also pointed out, we do lack the technology right now, but that is one necessary shift that we have to make in order to take a step towards sustainability. We have alternatives, we have hydrogen based fuels, we can use natural gas, we have biofuels available, but this shift to cleaner fuels is probably the need of the hour. And again, second, we can go for the adoption of electric vehicles. But electric vehicles, again, how do we do that? This is like, how do we manage the entire adoption of EVs is an important point. Along with that, the provision of charging for EVs is also important, because without charging points, EVs is of no use, right? So probably we can experiment this particular EV adoption part on a particular part of a city. So we can revamp the entire part of that particular city, experiment how it works out in that area of the city, and then check it on the other parts of the country. So we can show the results of this particular part to other cities and understand how this entire plan rolled out. So that way, step by step, we need to take this and move to electric vehicles in the future. Apart from this, I think infrastructure development is again one major thing that we have to take up. Why? Because see, your ultimate motive is to reduce travel time of people. How can you reduce travel time of people? You can build better roads, you can build better flyovers, you can improve the railway systems that are there. By doing all this, you're reducing the travel time of people. You reduce the travel time of people, that means there are vehicles on the road for a lesser amount of time, which automatically means lesser emissions, right? So this is again one front that we can look at this in. And probably finally, we can always motivate people to switch from their private vehicles to public transport. But actually, as a customer, as a person myself, I have always faced generally two issues in switching from private to public modes of transport. One is the end-to-end connectivity. You do not get that end-to-end connectivity in public modes of transport. And two, I think the comfort level that is there is still something that public modes of transport have not matched up yet. So if we can address these two issues, if public modes of transport can actually provide these two by probably collaborating with better startups and ensuring end-to-end connectivity, and by probably trying to, you cannot ever probably match up to the comfort that your own vehicle gives you, but at least try to undertake some steps towards achieving that. If you can address these two issues, then you can always incentivize people to shift from private vehicles to a public mode of transport. So yeah, I think these kind of steps will be the first steps. Again, these together, none of these will work independently, so all these together will probably be one step towards zero emissions. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Aparna. We believe that those are very key concepts that should be kept in mind while striving towards zero emission. So now that we have the basic idea about the theme, let's further delve into your respective fields of study. This time we'll start with Shivang. Our next question to you is, one of the most effective ways at the government level to control the number of carbon emissions by the production industries is said to be price carbon. Can you tell us more about price carbon and how it affects businesses? What's the threshold of it and its effect on the businesses?
Thank you, Shobham, for your question. I think I speak for everybody here. When you use the term price carbon, that is perhaps something that people may not have heard of. But carbon tax or carbon credits is probably something that most people have heard of. So I'm going to take it simply as this, right? Price carbon is a way of shifting accountability from the polluters to the ones who buy these particular credits. Now, these credits can be in two forms, which I'll come to later. But essentially what you're doing is that if a particular company, for example, a leading soft drink beverage company, right, it really pollutes the planet by selling cans made out of tin and use a lot of aluminum, a lot of water, and puts it back terribly, right? There's a lot of carbon emitting out of it, essentially. So this company can either pay a tax to respective governments and jurisdictions wherever these manufacturing units are based out of, one. Two, which is the second system, is a emissions trading system or an ETS. Now, this particular system, the first one that I'm going to cover, is very interesting because this caps the total level of greenhouse emissions that can come out from an industry or from a particular company, right? This company, if one company A, if it pollutes less than the cap that is put on it, this extra allowance can be sold to a company that emits more pollution than it is allowed to. So for example, a very ecologically responsible company can sell their shares, not shares, but let's say allowances or remittances, to another company that is not that responsible, or because of the nature of their business pollutes more than it should. And so the total amount of carbon being added is limited. Now, this is related to another concept called net zero carbon emissions, which is where a lot of countries have said by the year 2030, by 2050, they're trying to be net zero carbon. This essentially means that you're trying to keep all your carbon emissions down to zero. You're using newer technologies. For example, let me talk about Adidas Parley. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, but Adidas Parley is an attempt at making shoes out of the plastic collected in the ocean. What they essentially do is they take these plastic bottles and other materials found on the ocean bed, convert it into nylon, convert it into these fabric-based nylons, and then sew shoes together. And this is sold back to consumers through the Adidas channel. This is a way of getting to net zero carbon. Now, the other one is a basic carbon tax, which is a defined rate, a tax rate on greenhouse emissions. Now, this is something like, for example, a major oil producing company in India would be taxed money at a particular rate, at the rate of how much emissions they do. Like we have income tax as a form of direct tax, you can have a carbon tax. So these are the main two ways by which price carbon is used to hold countries accountable for their actions, right? Now, the second part of your question is how it affects business and what is the limit of it. I think to largely look at this, it may seem unfair to businesses, the fact that this is a new thing, new compliance that they have to take care of. But yeah, at the end of the day, what you're looking at is that a small company, somebody who has less than a 50 crore turnover, is probably not a major pollutant. I think a lot of news outlets have cited this in the past, that, and this will come as a bit of a shock to the people present here today, that 100 companies in the world are responsible for 70% of the emissions, of the total global emissions, 100 companies. And I don't want to name them, but a lot of them are part of Fortune 500. So while a lot of people will come to you and tell you, you should really walk home rather than taking a cab. But the question here is, of course, it shouldn't be one or the other. But the question really is, are you responsible for the Paris Agreement? Are you responsible, or are you accountable for ensuring that the average mean temperature of the planet doesn't rise by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius in a century's time? Is it really you, 1 out of 7 billion people, who's doing that? Or is it an XYZ company in the Fortune 500? So I'm going to say that it's not really limiting on businesses. It's not something that limits you. I think for a sustainable, like I said earlier, that for the coming generations of tomorrow, if you want to ensure that they have a world to live in, if you ensure that you don't actually have to rely on Elon Musk's plan B as your plan A, where you do have to look out for another planet in the solar system, I think this is not really a limitation. It is something that you must do. And I like to end with that thought. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. We are not looking for a plan B. This plan A is definitely the ideal one. And yes, it was a great initiative taken by the Adidas, which you mentioned. So now moving on to the next question with Sohan now. So Sohan, our next question to you is, nowadays a lot is being talked about the sustainable healthcare system to make the healthcare treatment greener. Can you please tell us the idea behind this concept, how it aims to make healthcare sustainable and its viability in a country like ours, which is vast and would want to provide low-cost healthcare to its citizens?
Sure. Thank you on that. Yes, talking about sustainability in itself in 2020, the UK National Health Service committed to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. But truly, how far will these numbers and promises, these goals on documents that are signed on some day in some exotic location take us unless we start planning and executing them? Our health systems must commit to achieve ambitious emission targets and share the best practices, and then only we can say that the race to zero is on. I'll not take much of your time, but the quest for net zero healthcare emissions involves reimagining a society where health and well-being are being prioritized. But at the same time, we are also providing incentives that are aligned to promote fiscal and environmental stewardship. So I led a basic layout plan where there are 4 principles on which we can build a well-defined sustainable healthcare system. We'll just graze through the 4 principles, technicalities, and a simple layman's term. In the first principle is to reduce the demand for health services. What has happened is that the combination of population growth, aging, this increasing global burden of disease, and to add to that, the complex diagnostic and treatment methods, these have resulted in huge demand for health services. If we start improving the health standard of the people through public policies that strengthen the social determinants, like including more of counseling, immunization, contraception, screening programs, then we'll be able to manage it better. In layman's term, if we decrease the demand, if we decrease the number of patients, then we'll obviously be needing less resources. And if we are needing less resources, we are having less wastage of those resources. So this was the first principle. Second is that match the supply of health services to demand, ensuring appropriate care and avoid unnecessary investigations and treatment. Again, in simple terms, provide the patient with whatever he needs, not less, not more. That's it. That's the best way to do it. The third principle is that it's a bit of an interesting thing. Healthcare sustainability to reduce emissions of supply of health services. Whatever we are applying to other intersectoral areas, we are applying this to healthcare through optimizing building environmental performance, decarbonizing hospital energy supplies. Interestingly, 90% of the product emissions are generated in the manufacturing unit. So recycling programs will be a great option to look upon. For example, medical devices in the at present are being designed that can be reused and kept in circulation for as long as possible. Moving to the final principle is that of an concept of an integrated disease management. It is about integrated will include a multi-professional team, coordinated primary healthcare worker, then a specialist, and allied health services. If a single place will cater to all the needs, that will itself solve a big chunk of a problem. Now you asked about India, then I must say, a particular field where a techno-savvy nation like India, with its national policies heading towards digitalization of every field, then a robust virtual healthcare system is what we are looking at. And already this has been proven and trialed in the COVID-19 pandemic. It can reduce travel requirements, it is more convenient, cost effective, improve healthcare access to people in the rural and remote areas. Yes, I admit, this health equity necessitates adequate access to telehealth technology and internet services. But yes, these are also the zones where we as a nation are working at our optimum to reach the zenith. So why not see this as a potential option? These initiatives can improve the patient experience and accelerate definitive treatment. This race to net zero healthcare emissions, or we are simply saying the sustainable approach, is not simply a climate change mitigation strategy, but rather a capstone of social transition towards the health and well-being for all. The health sector must chart a radically new course requiring transformational change to ensure sustainable integrational health equity. And that's what I had to say about this sustainable approach towards the healthcare.
Thank you, Sohan, for highlighting some key changes, some key changes that has to be implemented in to achieve sustainable health system. Next, we'll be heading to Nathan. So our question to you, Nitin, is that river linking has been a much talk about topic in our country for since long, and the government seems to be ambitious on these projects. Can you please enlighten us on the necessity and ecological impacts of the same?
Yes, in our country, river linkages is not a new topic. River linkages has been started from 1975, which was proposed by the KL Rao committee. They proposed a national water grid, and at present, the national river planning linkages has continued. And if you see that our country face two major disasters every year. The first one is flood. About 12% land area of the India is prone to flood, and the second one is drought. About 68% area of the India is prone to flood. So these river linkages will help to mitigate the impact of both these disasters, because these two disasters are covering approx 80% of the land area. So there are some negative and as well as positive impact of this river linking. So the first one is positive is that we will transfer the surplus water from Himalayan basin to the water deficit basin. And the second one is, if we will make the reservoir and dams, we can use that water for irrigation. And if the irrigated area will increase, then the total output of the agricultural product will increase. And we know that the about 50% population of the India at present dependent on the agriculture. And we can also produce the electricity from this water linking project. And by linking this river, we can also use water channel for the inland waterways. And there are also some negative impacts, like as this submergence of land will affect the eco ecology of the Himalayan system, and that can also be the cause of the seismic activity in the Himalayas. And the another is this waterlogging problem increase the salinity in the infertile land areas, like in the case of some areas of Rajasthan and Punjab, we can see this impact. And the another one is that if any river is polluted, then that river will spread the toxicity to the other areas. And if we are linking two rivers, and if a river is providing any kind of job to the people living vicinity of the river, then this will affect their life. Like as in the case of marine aquatic system, if some people are depend on the fishing, then that aquatic ecosystem will migrate from one river to the another river. But I will say that the water linking is a good solution for mitigate the impact of these two main disasters in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitin, for putting forward the geographical impacts. So now with this, we will be moving to Aparna now. So Aparna, our next question to you is, how can we work with suppliers to find the collaborative solutions to minimize ecosystem impacts across the supply chain? How can we promote landscape conservation and restoration investments as part of net zero emission efforts?
All right. So now if we have to again look at net zero emissions through the supply chain angle, right? So there's this study that I came across where there's this McKinsey report that said that supply chain alone accounts to 90% of the impact that a company makes, that the negative impact that a company makes on the environment. So again, supply chain therefore becomes a very important aspect that we have to look at in order to go towards net zero emissions. So probably one aspect of supply chain, I'll take up logistics, let us say. So consider an e-commerce company like say Amazon or Flipkart. So one of the most important tasks of these companies is the logistics, right? One issue that I see here is that there is no standardization of trucks that is there for these companies. So while they make these shipments, there are the for each type of truck sizes that are available, there is no standardization among that. So why is this an issue? Because when there is no standardization, you get different sizes of trucks for each kind of shipments that you're doing. And when there is no standardization, the number of shipments that you make for each truck varies, and therefore you will require more number of trucks for transporting the same amount of goods or the same volume of goods. Now this becomes an issue because unnecessarily you're increasing the number of trucks to be taken on road to deliver your goods. So one collaboration that needs to be done is with these kind of truck suppliers, make better arrangements in order to standardize the truck requirements so that you can optimize the number of shipments on a per truck basis. So this is probably one aspect that we can look at in the supply chain. And the second could be the packaging. Again, in an e-commerce company, again, in this sector, if you look at packaging, so generally what happens is that there are these suppliers and vendors of a particular good. So these vendors do the packaging on their own. They do some kind of minimal packaging and then send these goods to again Amazon or a Flipkart, where these companies again have to do repackaging and then finally deliver it to the consumers. So what exactly is happening? You're packaging twice, so you're using double the amount of plastic required and unnecessarily increasing the travel costs as well. So in order to minimize the packaging, what we can do is educate the vendors, educate the suppliers on the guidelines that are laid out. So you have these international authorities that lay down particular guidelines on packaging certain types of goods. So if there are standardized rules again, the vendors themselves will do the packaging in the first go. So these do not have to go back to Amazon or Flipkart or any e-commerce facility. So you're doing two things here. You're avoiding the travel that is involved again, and you're avoiding the repackaging that is done. So these two things will, again, this will be an incentive for the suppliers, because Amazon will cut costs because they don't have to, repack it again. And therefore that will act as an incentive for the suppliers too. And probably the final way that I can think of is reverse logistics. So companies can, come back to your places, collect the packaging material that they already supplied to you, and then go back. So I think these three would kind of be, the steps where you can collaborate with suppliers and increase investments in these kind of areas of the supply chain in order to move to net zero emissions.
Thank you, Aparna. Those were some really interesting collaborative solutions that you brought forward. So now the final question of this round to Vishal. The need for planning towards green and sustainable buildings is at peak today. How is the construction industry planning to achieve this? Also, is there a role that technology can play in reducing carbon footprint?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So regarding how we can approach these things sustainably. So there is a very interesting tool that you mentioned about, that how we can approach it technologically. That is known as life cycle assessment tool. So what basically happens in it, to just give a brief outline, that it use approaches like cradle to grave approach, cradle to cradle approach. So what it basically means. Now, suppose we are going to manufacture a product, or let's say plant-based product. So what we generally see is what effect it produces at the last. So be it the natural gas or petrol, what is the defining criteria that we use? We see that petrol is giving out more pollution and natural gas is seemingly more clean, right? But what this life cycle assessment does is it goes back to the very root from where all these things started, to have a holistic view. For example, both of the natural gas and petrol comes from the same process of petroleum refining, right? So to that stage, they are having the same kind of environmental impact that they are having. Now, at the last stage, it is different, that petrol is having a significant more impact on the environment rather than natural. So also Sohan had pointed out that how green and diet can actually be helpful, or we have to maintain the balance. So following this life cycle assessment tool, it was found that meat has a certain more impact on environment than the green vegetables that was done using this. And similarly, coming back to the original argument that I was putting, that using this the same tool, we first access that now in the farming we have used a tractor, so there is a certain environmental damage to it. Similarly, we have done tilling or put water. So all of the stages, whether it is manufacturing, the transport, everything is calculated, and then we finally assign a certain number to it, that this much it is causing the pollution. So that tool is actually growing, like it is improving day by day. Certainly it is all natural things, and it is difficult to assign a number, but that's what we do in engineering. Like we have to approximate many things. So when we approximate, we have a certain fair idea that how we can actually proceed with these kind of products, and these life cycle assessment tool have been proving to be a great value in this cycle. So yeah, so these kind of technology can be used by any industry. It is not specifically limited to construction, building, or anything, but be it the medical department, or when there is packaging happening. So with this tool, it can pervade all of the things. But yes, the limitation is how do we actually assign that number. That takes actually a lot of trials. We have to do a lot of trials, and by doing a lot of trials, experiments, we arrive at a certain data. We are still not sure whether it would be right or not, but we get a certain fair idea that how things would operate. So that is the way that these things are doing in the status quo.
So thank you, Vishal, and thank you all the participants. Now, that was really an insightful and knowledgeable discussion. Now, after some serious discussions on theme, now let's head towards the fun and the interesting part. Now we will be moving to the next round, that is rapid fire round. So we will be beginning with Aparna first. So Aparna, kindly unmute yourself.
Yeah.
So the first question is, who is your favorite public speaker?
public speaker, I would say probably Harsha Bhogle.
If you are granted a wish to become what you want, what would you like to become?
Okay. I would probably become a problem solver, like in any aspect, like with people or in problems, general problem solver.
Okay. And describe yourself in one line.
Okay. I am an empathetic and a confident individual who gives, who pays attention to details.
Okay. Next is what is your favorite quote?
Quote. Okay, so this I am not sure. I mean, it's not exactly a quote, but it's a kind of a saying where they say we don't realize the value of something important unless it's gone. So you should always appreciate the little things in life. So that is it.
And last question is, if you were to write a book on yourself, what genre would it be?
Um, Not exactly a categorization, but probably it would be a compilation of some short stories.
Okay.
Next up is Nitin. You can unmute yourself.
जी.
So, Nitin, who's your favorite author?
Author. hmm, Elon Musk.
Okay. Who's your favorite public speaker?
Public speaker. Kumar Viswas.
Tell us one best thing about your campus.
Natural beauty as well as human beauty in the context of intellectual and maturity.
Okay. One innovative business or product idea that came to your mind in childhood.
Planting more trees.
Okay. If you had a chance to make a news headline about yourself, what would it be?
I want to die for the country.
Okay, that was really nice. Now we will be moving to Vishal. So Vishal, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah.
So Vishal, first question is, describe yourself in one line.
I am pursuing the meaning of life.
Right. If you are granted a wish to become what you want, what would you like to become?
As you know, my attachment with spirituality, I would say that I would be a kind of, to be honest, a sadhu.
That is something different. So next question is, who is your favorite public speaker?
Narendra Modi.
One innovative business idea or business product that came to your mind in your childhood.
So this has a context that I was watching crime stories. So I thought there should be robot judges, and I'm going to make some robot judges, and they are going to give that judgment.
So next is, who is your favorite fictional character?
Favorite fictional character. To be honest, I have read non-fiction a lot, but I would still Khaled Hosseini, the Kite Runners book, the Hamid. I'm just forgetting the name. The main character of that.
Okay.
Those were some unexpected answers as well. So we'll move to Shivang now.
Sure.
Who's your favorite public speaker?
Jordan Peterson.
What is your favorite courtroom phrase?
What is my favorite what phrase?
Courtroom phrase.
Cold room.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the first time I've heard of that, but I don't know what's up.
If you had a chance to spread a rumor about yourself, what would it be?
Rumor about myself. I spoke to God last night.
Okay. One innovative business product idea that came to your mind in childhood.
Okay, so this one's interesting. I read this fact as a child called, it was something like 1 ton of waste products, electronic waste products, has 100 times more gold than a gold mine, gram for gram. So my business idea was I'm going to buy all the left, like all the useless phones, and I'm going to mine them for gold and sell it. To be honest, it still sounds like a really good idea. So might just do that after my MBA.
We'll look forward to it. If you were to write a book on yourself, what genre would it be?
Um, what genre would it be? It would be an autobiography, and it would be called The Devil's Advocate.
That was amazing. And now we will be moving to Sohan now. Sohan, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah.
So, if you were to have one supernatural power, what would you like to have?
Supernatural power. I can solve any problem with my fingers.
Who is your favorite public speaker?
I'll go with Sandeep Maheshwari.
Okay. Who is your favorite poet?
Poet. Okay. Uh, Poet. I myself write. I don't read much, but yes, I like Robert Louis Stevenson's work, and of course William Shakespeare.
Tell us the best thing about your campus.
You must see the number of patients we treat here and the smile on their face.
If you were to write a book on yourself, what genre would it be?
Make it a tragic comedy.
Now, that was really rapid and very exciting. We indeed had a great thought-provoking discussion with all of you today. Now we will enter our third and final segment of the event. I would like you to conclude individually and tell how you would like to see the global net zero future. Any one of you can start.
Can I go ahead? Okay, so first of all, I'd like to start with the fact that I think this is one of the best platforms that I've been to. And I'll tell you the reason. I won't say this everywhere I go. The reason is I think the concept of calling somebody from JNU, somebody from AIMS, somebody from IIT, somebody from like people from IIMs. I think the concept behind is that you now have the beauty of democratized discussions with some of the assumed to be the better, educated or informed or whatever people. Now this amplified at a magnitude of, instead of like 46, 50 people, if you garner enough attention and it snowballs into something big, you can really solve a lot of problems. So thank you so much for that. But to conclude, I think we all knew what we came here for. I come, my college is at a city, Shillong, right? We're very, very big with sustainability. It's all about tomorrow, and it's all about, maintaining that greenery on this planet Earth. So I think we're all largely on the same page. All of us who understand what's happening, none of us are climate change deniers. None of us are people who think the future won't be better. And I thank you guys, Ayush, Shubham, and the entire team for pulling this together. Thank you.
And so can I go ahead then after Shivang is done?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So all of what we had discussed, they are on one side, how we can technologically look at the things, or how economically we can make it viable, or the medical aspect of it. But one thing that was very much common, that how we can motivate people, how people can actually change. So we have to, there are two kinds of conservation that can do that, first level and second level. So at first level, we are just causing the external changes, like how we can change the technology. But the second and deeper change that should come is how we change ourselves, how we conduct ourselves. So there is a famous anecdote. I do not know how much it real is, but in UN once it was a meeting happening, that Ban Ki-moon was there, who was the then the president, head of the UN. So it was being discussed that how we can make a woman who is carrying who doesn't have a husband and has child to make think about the environment. Then only we can actually solve the problem. Otherwise, whatever solution we offer, they are going to resort back to their needs. So until and unless there is a radical change in how we conduct ourselves or the consciousness in which we operate, there is no solution to the climate change. We solve one thing, there are 1,000 problems that crop up. So there is a famous saying also that outer pollution is a manifestation of our inner pollution. You may have seen it happening in your life, that one day you were very happy and you were in jolly mood and you were thinking about the environment, but on another day you were feeling very nasty and you do not really care whoever is around, you want to throw things away, and these kind of mood are there. So how we are actually impact the environment also. So if that kind of change in consciousness we can bring, that could be a greater contribution how we solve the environment problems, rather than all of what we had discussed. They certainly have an impact, but a crucial part of, I do believe, that also lies in the consciousness. Yeah. So thank you so much, the team Vani of IIM Amritsar, for organizing such an event. I'm really grateful.
I would be going next. Yes, I also agree with Sivang sir. Hearing to so many speakers from an array of fields gives us such a panoramic view of the theme. That is what makes such panel discussions par excellence in terms of insight that they're going to provide to the listeners and the tons of new ideas to ponder upon they take back with them. For example, be it today's Aparna's collaborative approach plan or Sivang sir's explanation of pricing carbon. So it was just a marvelous discussion on this particular theme that has been gaining gravity since the last 2 decades, and yet has the potential to be in limelight for years to come, until we, the ones having the vision, rightfully inherit the blazing torch of the revolution to save this mankind. And it's high time we wake up and start walking towards it to compensate for the havoc we have managed to cause to the climate under the hood of modernization, actually. And lastly, the same thing, a sustainable and integrated approach where we prioritize nature ahead of our comfort zone for the future projects shall be of significant value, because we must keep in mind that this greatest threat of extinction, the climate change, is a battle still half fought. So that's all from my side. I thank you. Thank you, the team Vani, for having me here. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll go next. So the topic that we had at hand today about climate change. So in my opinion, humans have always found solutions rapidly according to the environment that they've been living in, right? So whatever adaptation they've done to the environment, they have done it. They have developed new technologies to suit their needs, satisfy their wants. So they've been continually doing this. And that is probably why industrialization has taken place for the last so many years. But this industrialization has come with its own negative consequences, its negative impact on the climate. But does that mean that we now go back, 20 or 30 years back in time just because we want to avoid these negative impacts? I don't think so, right? What we can do is, because this continual development is definitely required, it is a step towards progressing forward. So therefore, the question here is not about worrying about the threats that climate change is actually causing to the mankind. We have to look at this as an opportunity and shape our practices so as to better suit the needs and ultimately lessen its impact on the earth as a whole. So therefore, the topic, the climate change threat to mankind versus opportunity for sustainability, I definitely think we should, look at all this in the latter's perspective and try to go in that direction. Thank you.
Now I am the last. We are seeing that climate is changing, but I will conclude in 4 words. Now we need to change our behavior. We need to change our policies. We need to change our approach. We need to change our practices. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank to Team Vani and all the participants, and Subhamji and Ayushi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was really a fascinating and enjoyable session, and some really important and crucial points were put forward by everyone. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as we did. So now I would like anyone from the audience to share the views on the event. Anyone from the audience?
Yeah, I would like to share the feedback. So I would say thank you for organizing such an event where students from various colleges could share their unique perspectives and discuss about a topic which has become very prevalent in the current times, which is the climate. So, and lot of key issues were discussed, such as steps to achieve net zero carbon emissions, which is really insightful. Thank you for such a.
Thank you, Akash, for your appreciative words. Now I would request Shubham to present the vote of thanks.
Hello, everyone. It was amazing to host such amazing individuals from various fields and colleges across the country. First and foremost, we'd like to express our gratitude to all the participants who shared their perspective on the topic. Next, we would like to express our gratitude to the literary clubs of JNU, AIMS Raipur, IIT Kanpur, and IIM Shillong for acknowledging and sending their nominations. Last but not least, the students of IIM Amritsar, whose patience and constant support have helped make the event successful. Once again, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.